Hey guys, it's Jeff. Today I'm going to be reviewing 1984 by George Orwell. This was released in 1949 and it is 312 pages long. And the way that I came across this book is I think a lot of people had to read it, in school for homework or, an assignment or something like that. But I never had to. And I was walking through Barnes & Noble one day, just saw it on the shelf, and I had heard about the book, but never really gave it a second thought. Just walked over to it, picked it up, and started reading it, and could not put it down. This quickly became one of my favorite books of all time. I just got through it so quickly, and the world that George Orwell has created in this book is just haunting but fascinating at the same time. And I'm glad I picked it up. And the reason why this channel exists is because of this book. So this book single-handedly got me back into reading again after having, reading a book here and there. But this one is definitely the reason why I've been able to do so many reviews lately and that I've, picked up all this momentum for reading. So thank this book for that. So the reason why it's called 1984 is because George Orwell, this is his vision of how he felt the world in its current state was heading towards the type of society that he portrays in this book. So in this book, the government is totalitarian, which means that it's basically run by a dictatorship, and it's a dystopian novel, so it's basically just a nightmarish world that you don't want to live in. Everybody in Oceania, where it takes place, is run by the party, which is basically the name of the government or the name that they use for themselves. And the citizens of Oceania are under constant surveillance 24/7. You never have a thought to yourself. You are never alone. When you go home, there are what they call telescreens in your house, pretty much in every room, that where there's someone on the other side always watching what you're doing. You have no individuality, and in fact, if you try to express your dissatisfaction with the party or the government or anything that they, not only them, but anything that they do or they've decreed, then that's punishable by death. The world is in a after like a world war. It's been divided into 3 different countries or different areas. The main story where our lead character, Winston Smith, is living and takes place is in Oceania, and the neighboring countries are East Asia and Eurasia. And as a form of control, the party in Oceania basically has an agreement between all of these neighboring countries that they're going to be in a state of perpetual war, or at least they have this illusion of being at war with these countries, when in fact, if a bomb goes off in Oceania or people die, it's actually the government attacking its own people to keep them in a constant state of panic and a constant state of control, to where they don't want people feeling the need to rise up and overthrow the government. So at one point, for example, if they were at war, if Oceania said that they were at war with East Asia, the next day, or with not even the next day, within like the next hour, they could say, "Oh no, we've always been at war with Eurasia, which is the other country. We've always been allies with East Asia." And people are like, "Oh my God, they're right. Yes, I totally get it. We've always been at war with Eurasia instead of East Asia." So they've got all these banners like, "Oh, we're at war with Eurasia," and then they have to tear them all down really quickly and then put up, "Oh, we're at war with East Asia now." So it's this constant state of confusion where they don't allow the citizens of Oceania to fully understand what's going on all the time, as another form of control to them. Thinking bad things about the government is punishable by death. They call it thought crime. So, for example, if you're a sleep talker, subconsciously, if you were to say something in the middle of the night while you were sleeping, like down with the party, or I don't agree with what the party said or what they did in this situation, even though it was subconscious and you didn't intentionally say it, it's still in your mind, and they will arrest you for it and they will kill you for that, even though you had no control over it. Writing things down in a journal is punishable by death, which actually gives Winston Smith some satisfaction when he decides to do that. He's found a blind spot in his apartment where he can safely write things down, and he feels rebellious. He's already rebellious in his mind because he knows that there is something wrong with this government. He doesn't understand why people are not going against this, and I mean, he understands of how dangerous an idea that is to rise up against the government that is so powerful, but he doesn't understand why he's never really come across anyone else that thinks exactly like him. So the very act of writing something down in a journal within the privacy of his own home is very satisfying to him because he knows that the party doesn't allow it, but he's doing it anyway. And this small act of rebelliousness kind of gives him hope for the future. The most of the population is consisted of proletarians, I think is the full word, but it's most of the book is abbreviated as proles, which is basically like the working class people, which is, if I remember, something like 85% of the population. Winston is part of the middle, I want to say middle like 10%, so like the middle class. And then there's like a higher upper class, like where all the party, like the upper party members are that work for the party. But Winston Smith works for a division of the government that is responsible for correcting newspaper articles and magazines and things like that. So, for example, there was a moment in the book where the party was in a newspaper article that said there were 25,000 children that needed shoes. The party had 50,000 extra pairs of shoes on hand, so there were 25,000 extra pairs of shoes in excess of what they actually needed. So they sent him an article sent him an instruction saying, you need to fix this article so that when it said that we needed 25,000 pairs of shoes, we actually had 25,000 pairs of shoes instead of 50,000. So they wanted to change it to make it seem like they had the exact correct number of shoes for that population, so that they didn't have an extra 25,000 and it didn't seem like they were wasting money and resources on it. 25,000 people needed shoes. Oh, look, we happen to have 25,000 shoes on hand. Look at us, we're so great because we knew exactly how many shoes to have for those people. Praise us, that type of thing. So he gets these instructions, but they're not in they're in a dumbed down form of English, which is called Newspeak, and as another form of control, the party is trying to dumb down the English language by taking the root core of that word and making it as basic and simple as possible. So if you were to say a sentence, rather than having, why say a sentence in 10 words when you can say it in 5 words? So for example, so instead of saying like good, better, and best, good, better, and best would become good plus good and double plus good. So plus good would be better and double plus good would be best. So they're taking that word good and extrapolating that into, basically saying good plus good and double plus good. And for example, this like instruction that they give to Winston to try to fix one of these articles, I have it on page 44 here. So the instruction that he got was Times 3.12.83, reporting BB, day order, double plus ungood, refs unpersons, rewrite, full-wise, upsub, antifiling. And it says, in Old Speak or Standard English, this might be rendered, and here's like the actual English version, the reporting of Big Brother's order for the day in the Times of December 3rd, 1983, is extremely unsatisfactory and makes references to non-existent persons. Rewrite it in full and submit your draft to higher authority before filing. So if you can imagine that entire paragraph condensed down into maybe 12 words, it almost sounds like comical to want to to want to write it like that, but the government is just that controlling, where people are no longer even allowed to speak English properly, and they just try to control them even more that way. So, for example, if you were rebellious against the party or the government, not only would they kill you, but it referenced in that section there, they called it an unperson. So instead of just killing you, they make you an unperson, which means they delete your entire existence, and they delete any record of you ever have being born. I'm sorry, I can't say that properly. Ever have been born. So if you become an unperson, the people around you just have to pretend like you've never existed. If you bring that person up, they might be in danger too. They delete your entire existence if you're put to death. I don't know if it's always put to death, but usually if you're put to death, you've done something wrong. So most of the time, if you're killed by the government, then they make you an unperson. So you have to just go along with, oh yeah, that person never existed, I don't know who you're talking about, type of thing. Big Brother is the face of the party, so it's kind of their dictator. People aren't really sure of whether he exists or not. They have a face to his name, but they just have to go along with, oh, of course Big Brother exists. But Winston, in his mind, he's like, well, I've never actually seen him in person. We see photos of him and they're plastered literally around every corner, but we're not actually sure if he exists. And on the other side, Goldstein is the face of the revolution. So among all these citizens, people are aware that there's a guy named Goldstein who used to be like an upper party member, but changed sides and openly rebelled against the government, and the party is searching for him constantly. There's a book that's surfacing, or that's being spread around, I forget the name of it, but it's basically a rule book of, here's what the party's doing to us, here's why they're bad, here's how they're going to tear down our society even more, and here's how we can rise against them and stop them. So Winston is interested in rebelling against the government. He just doesn't know how to do it. And you can't really go to your neighbor and say, hey man, do you want to go rebel against the government today? Because you never know if that person might report you. And eventually he gets into contact with someone that he works with, a couple people, by, they kind of look at each other in a weird way, and he kind of suspects this person probably thinks the way that I do, but he doesn't want to be the first one to bring it up. So this book has, it basically follows Winston Smith in his journey of what it's like to live in this society and want to rebel against it, but being unable to, but being introduced into the world of, here are other people that think like you do, and here's how we can stop the government. So this book had fantastic momentum, and I honestly could not put it down. It was just, it hooked me instantly. So it had a great momentum. And then one of the people that he comes in contact with is Julia, who he works with, who he thought at first was trying to like rat him out, turn him in, but they end up having, a love relationship, and she ends up being on Winston's side, and, they try to, join the rebellion together. And so the book is really fast paced and up until that point, and it kind of slowed down. Like to me, the I don't mind a romantic relationship in a book, but it felt like this one really didn't need it. It felt a little forced in there to me. I would have rather have seen Winston would rather have him meet up with like another associate or work associate that he was rebelling with, rather than having this relationship. And I wasn't really sure that they actually loved each other like they say that they do, but it was one of those situations where they don't really have a choice. Like people can't really go out on dates like normal people can. Sex is viewed as purely for procreation. It's not meant for pleasure at all. In fact, if you're found having sex for pleasure, that's almost as I don't remember if it's punishable by death, but you don't want to, as silly as that sounds, you don't want to get caught like that. So it's meant only for procreation. So, I mean, I guess you can't really blame them for, falling for the only person that you could really have a secret relationship with. I mean, that's who you're left with. So of course they're going to feel some kind of attachment to that or to each other. I didn't really feel that the book needed that relationship, but it wasn't enough for me to knock any points off of it. It did slow it down a little bit, but then the book quickly ramps back up again fantastically. What I loved is that Winston is a very dynamic character where that he will fight for what is right no matter what. When he feels scared, you actually get that emotion within you. When he feels scared, I felt scared, and you get this nervousness of him going into work every day and seeing all these people who are just following the rules. And when he is, if his life is in jeopardy, or if he's in fear of being found out, like you get that adrenaline, that nervousness reading this book, and I thought that was fantastic. It wasn't just the book telling you he's in danger. You felt it. You felt every word of what Winston was saying and the fear that he felt. And also of the triumphant, when he was discussing, about him wanting to make the world a better place, or how it used to be, and you kind of get that sense of pride of wanting to, help him, make the world a better place. So overall, this book was absolutely fantastic. There's really nothing else to describe what it is. The reason why it's called 1984 is because George Orwell, back in 1949, felt that in the future this is where our current society is heading in this type of direction. And the just the sheer amount of detail that Orwell puts into creating this world, I mean, he really leaves nothing out. It's pretty amazing what kind of imagination that Orwell has in creating this world that's incredibly unique and incredibly gripping. So with that said, I'm going to give this book a 5 out of 5. It deserves every single point. What it does well is pretty much everything. The characters are fantastic that he meets along the way. Winston Smith himself is is a favorite of mine already. And I'm trying to do all this from memory because I read this actually like 8 months ago. So the first book that I read this year in 2018. So I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I definitely recommend that you pick this up. Now, that's the end of the review portion. If you want to stick around for afterwards, there are some spoilers, and I go into a little bit more detail as to why I really enjoyed, the ending of the book overall. So stick around. I'll wait a couple seconds if you want to pause it, just so you don't spoil it for yourself if you don't want to. All right, so here we are in the spoiler section. And I won't give away too much. I won't last too long. But if you read the book or if you didn't read the book does not have a happy ending. And I actually liked that. As much as I wanted Winston to succeed, that's kind of what you would expect in a book like that, where you would expect the main character to rebel against the government and then the government gets overthrown. But in this case, although Winston doesn't die, he basically dies inside and loses his sense of who he is and basically becomes one of the people that he looked down upon. The party eventually, one of the people that he meets up with, one of his bosses at work or a higher up at work, was the guy that gave him that look and said, I think you and I are on the same page. So this gentleman gives him the Goldstein book, says that he's working with Goldstein, that they're planning on overthrowing the government. But of course, that was all a lie. That was just a trick to get Winston and anybody else that was interested in overthrowing the party. Eventually, they capture him. They find out about the affair with Julia. They make him betray Julia, and they make Julia betray Winston in turn. They torture him to the point of him actually believing what they say to him, forcing him to believe the ideas of Big Brother, that the party is actually the good guy and everybody else is the bad guy. And for example, they basically tell him that, whatever we tell you, you're going to believe. And he does start to believe it. And at one point when they're torturing him, there's a scene where this, I wish I could remember his name, was holding up, fingers and saying, "What's 2 + 2?" And he's holding up 5 fingers or 4 fingers. And Winston keeps telling him 2 + 2 is 4, 2 + 2 is 4. And every time that he says 4, he gives him a shock of electricity and electrocutes him, to the point where when he's holding up his 4 fingers like this, and he says, "What's 2 + 2?" And because he's trying to make him to say 2 + 2 = 5, he's holding up 4 fingers, and eventually Winston starts to see. If I can do this on camera, this is going to look weird. Winston starts to see this finger kind of flickering into existence, like on his hand or on the other guy's hand. So he's saying, "What does 2 + 2 =?" And as much as Winston wants to say 4, he actually sees a 5th finger start to, come into existence like that, almost like a ghost finger. And he starts to believe that, yes, 2 + 2 does = 5 because I see 5 fingers. So they torture his mind enough to where they break him down and they release him back into society. But every time he sees a newspaper article and a news story, he's like, "Wow, Big Brother did it again. I'm so happy that I love Big Brother. I am fully on board with everything that he does." So yeah, by the end, they've tortured him enough to the point where he has lost all sense of what he was and what he stood for, and he's among the other people who live in this society that are, just following orders. And the guy that was torturing him said This is just the beginning. It's only going to get worse. So that's all I've got for spoilers. I wanted to say how much I enjoyed the ending not being a happy ending without, I didn't want to put that in the main review in case anybody, I didn't want to spoil anything during the main review. And although, like, obviously I'm not happy that, Winston was getting tortured, and I think the ending was very fitting because it shows that sometimes, like, the good guy doesn't win. Sometimes the good guy doesn't win. And it left me devastated, and my heart was so heavy knowing that Winston did not win. But not every story can have a happy ending, and this one, as sad as it was, it actually made it that much more impactful. So 5 out of 5, definitely pick this book up. 1984 by George Orwell. And I just want to say, isn't this a cool book? Like, isn't this like, it's a cool size. It's like, I like the text on the inside, and this eyeball on the front is supposed to signify Big Brother. He's always watching you. Or one of their slogans is Big Brother is always watching. So I would definitely recommend that you pick this book up. Feel free to like, dislike, and subscribe to this video if you want to. Drop a comment if you think I was wrong about something, or if you want to have a discussion on something else that I missed in the book, or another perspective that you might think that I might find interesting. Also leave a comment if you think that I would enjoy another book, and if I find that it might be interesting, then I might do a review on it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys on the next one.